staff through change, and we really want to take this opportunity to just work with colleagues and share with colleagues what's going on across CSUs and how we can support ourselves and each other through change. So my name's Lynn Tallentire. For those of you who don't know me, I recognise quite a few names. I'm Deputy Finance Director at Midlands and Lancashire CSU, and I'm pleased to say we've also got two colleagues joining us who will be speaking as well today. So Derek Kitchen, who is the Managing Director of Midlands and Lancashire CSU, is here to talk about his perspective on the future for CSUs. And also we've got Annette Walker, who is Finance Director for Bolton Teaching Hospitals, again to give her view as to what's going on the provider landscape. And there's going to be lots of opportunities for you to ask them questions after they've done some short presentations. And then we will have a short break, and then James Allen will join us, and he will be working with you this afternoon in an interactive session around how you can support yourself through change as well, and what skills and things you can bring to help you do that. Megan, have I covered off the main things there?
Yeah, you have. Apologies. My colleague just let me know that Annette actually isn't able to make it today, but her colleague Andrew Chilton is going to do her session instead.
Right. Okay. Thanks for letting me know, Megan.
No
That's
problem.
great. So first of all, before we start, I thought I would ask you guys a quick question, if that's okay. So I'm hoping you can now see my screen. If somebody could give me a thumbs up or something just to confirm that you can see that, that would be great. Yep, perfect. So if you either use the QR code on the screen, you can scan it with your mobile phone, or you can join via a web link at slido.com. You will get in there and it's going to ask you to enter a word about how are you feeling about the future of CSUs. And what we'll see is as people start to join the poll, and whatever word you put in there, they'll start to appear on the screen in front of us. So if I could ask you all just to take a minute to do that. Okay, so somebody's popped something in.
Good start.
So what the word cloud is actually doing is, if the same word comes up more than once, it will make it bigger on screen, just so you know.
Can you have more than one girl in?
You can enter as many as you like, yeah.
But can I put the same word in 40 times?
If you want, then it'll get really big on screen. We'll give colleagues another 30 seconds or so, and then we'll just talk briefly about what the picture is. Okay, hopefully everybody's had a chance to get in. I'll leave it open, so if you are struggling to get in and you manage to get in and you want to add something, that's fine. Thank you all, first of all, for your honesty. I think what you can see how from this is we're all in very different places about the future of CSUs at the moment and what that means. there's definitely a strong message about people are feeling a little bit unsure and unclear and maybe a bit apprehensive because they can't, you know, they're not clear on what's happening. Some people are feeling in quite a negative place, but we've also got groups of people who are feeling more empowered and positive and motivated and happy about some things that are going on at the moment. So within this group, we've got a range of emotions and feelings, and that's perfectly normal, especially when we're going through a period of change like we are at the moment, with the formation of ICBs imminently upon the horizon. So what I will start with is we will ask Derek if he could introduce himself and talk a little bit more about CSUs and what he envisages the opportunities and risks are for CSUs around the future. So Derek, over to you.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Derek Kitchen, Managing Director of Midlands and Lancs CSU. Been doing that role in Staffordshire CSU as it began, then through to Staffordshire and Lancashire CSU as it became, and then Midlands and Lancs as it became in 2014. So I've been doing this for 10 years, which is probably the longest time I've been with any organisation throughout my 47 years at work and the 30 years that I've been in the NHS. And so that tells you that I've been in the position that you've been in a few times. I've been through a lot of change, etc., etc. And I'm sorry if you can hear the Amazon man ringing the doorbell. And I'm just so pleased to be asked to do this, because clearly from the numbers I've just given you, I'm probably a little bit older than anybody else on the call. And it's probably this session that and what I want to say is probably as much about helping you to think about how good you are and be confident about yourselves as we go through change, as much as anything else. You're not going to get PowerPoint presentation from me, I'm afraid. I don't tend to do those anymore. First thing I want to say is thank you for inviting me to this session today. I'm a very, very passionate believer and hopefully a practitioner in ensuring that staff are enabled, empowered and careful. And the last one I genuinely mean. I often say that with utter belief that the CSU isn't about the directors and the managers and the etc., etc. In our case, it's about 1,800 people who do a great job day in, day out. And it's important that we recognise that by making sure those 1,800 people are exactly as I've said, enabled, empowered and cared for. There's a very important point here for people who do the job that I do, is every one of you on this call this afternoon has trusted your CSU, your MD and their immediate team around them with your career. That's a responsibility I really do welcome. You've said, I am happy to place my career and my life in the hands of this organisation, and we have an absolute obligation and responsibility to make sure that that trust is returned with some return on that investment. So thank you very much for that. The one thing I haven't said about myself is I know how you feel for another reason, because I'm also a qualified accountant. I was a finance director of the mental health trust in the 90s, 94 to 2000, before I moved into wider management, etc., etc. So I don't only speak with some experience of the world in general, but also what it's like to be a finance person up until 1994 and in the health service between 86 and 94. And anybody of that vintage will know that the period 86 through to 94 was a massive change for the NHS, but also a massive change for the finance function. And I haven't got the time, and I'm not sure you'd all want to hear the detail behind that and the nuances at that time. But that was the period in which the internal market came into being, which led to the provider purchase and split, which led to such roles as contract management, such roles as contract finance. And in a wonderful world of irony, I'm talking to you today on the basis that we're now trying to do away with all that competitive stuff, do away with all that combativeness, for want of a better word, that's crept into how we organise the financing of and assuring the performance of the delivery of services to people who need the health services care. And that brings me on to my next point, which is change is a constant in our lives. We can't escape that. And I fully recognise that some people are on the end of a spectrum that can handle and welcome, and a bit like myself, enjoy change. And on the other end of the spectrum, there are people who use the words that came up on that Slido a couple of moments ago about how they feel about change. But it is a constant, and it's our role to help you through those changes. It's a constant professionally. I've lost count of the number of changes I've been through. I've alluded to that a little bit, but constantly as well during our personal lives. Just look at the last 2.5 years. I know we seem in a comfortable place now with COVID, but I don't think anybody in this call, anybody on the planet, would have anticipated the changes that we've been through during 2020 and 2021 as a result of the pandemic. The one constant in all of this is you as people. It's yourself, it's your ability, it's your professionalism, it's your commitment and your personalities. That is the one constant throughout of all of this. You are all extremely valuable people and professionals, not just to the CSUs, but to the NHS as a whole. I find it useful to reflect at the end of each day on what I've done during the day, no cheeky comments please, and work out what impact that today's work will have had on patients. I am pleasantly surprised by how I answer that question, and I am my own worst critic, so there's no cheating going on. I'd ask you to do the same. You may well be pleasantly surprised. We all play an important role in ensuring somebody who needs a service is going to get that service, and we are all part of that wonderful machinery in the NHS that does whatever it can to make better the lives of those people who need our services. So before I go any further, I want to thank you all individually for everything that you do for the NHS and for the people who need our services and who depend on us so much as a body of staff within the service. So looking forward to July and beyond, and it's not that far away now, is it? What, 4 or 5 weeks, something like that, if I've got the maths right. Yes, and beyond that second close down in 13 weeks. As accountants, I'm sure we all know how happy we are about that. It's important to remember that what you do today will still be important after the 1st of July and beyond the 1st of July. This is where being in finance is great. There will always be an NHS, and there will always be money, obviously, to run this NHS, and therefore it follows that there will always be a need for NHS professionals. The logic is impeachable, and other than systems, other than processes, other than different relationships, ultimately, for all of the time that I've been in the NHS, the basic things to run finance and to ensure that finances are available, managed, and we're assured on both of those have never really changed, those underlying principles, and they won't change after the 1st of July. The issue, of course, is there are lots of us, and an ICS will bring lots of similar professionals and similar people together, and it's not just true of finance. And that suggests there is an opportunity for some rationalisation in delivering services to ICSs, ICBs in the future. We can't get away from that. We cannot hide from it. It's what all of us would professionally advise as advisors to our CCGs now, as advisors to ICBs in the future. We would professionally advise those organisations to be as effective as they can in terms of delivery and as effective as they can in terms of cost. And therefore, we have to apply that same discipline to ourselves. And I'm sure a number of us have already been through that thought process on this change, but on those change processes that we've been through in the past. What I would ask you to consider, and I'm not being competitive here, and I'm not being disrespectful or looking to disadvantage any other people in any other part of the system, but this is a CSU meeting. What I would ask you to consider is that you as CSU staff should not consider yourselves as being the poor relation. And I know that might sound strong language, but we were, to a degree, there was an element of poor relation about CSU staff back in 2012 when we all came in from PCTs, etc., etc., etc. We're in a different place now. You shouldn't think of yourselves as being the poor relation, and shouldn't be making the assumption that if a job comes up or there's a need to rationalise, that providers and or CCG or soon to be ex-CCG staff will be the first in line and the first in, and will be in pole position. The processes that we have in place will not allow that to happen. But perhaps much more importantly, I've been involved in a significant number of discussions with emerging and now ICB executives, chief exec level, finance director level, etc., etc. And the language that I am consistently hearing is that all NHS professionals in an ICB will be treated equally, will be treated fairly, and there is a need to start to recognise that you do not need to have the same badge on your shirt to be taking part in a process within an ICB. There is a number of people, significant number of experienced and senior people saying there is nothing wrong with us bringing teams of people from different organisations together to deliver something for the ICB. Of course, that would have to pass the effectiveness test, that would have to pass the VFM test, etc., etc. But there is a mindset emerging that says partnership, working together and treating people equally, fairly and with dignity is emerging at a fast rate of knots. I want to think about that a little bit more, and I'll do it in this way. Providers are going to be under significant pressure as organisations. Working together in provider collaboratives is something new for them, and will be a challenge, as collaboration will be a challenge for everybody. And God knows, we all know that the collaboration work has been really tough for CSUs over the last 3 or 4 years. But more importantly, there is the post-COVID recovery, whilst continuing to deal with the tail end of the pandemic, recognising that COVID is now never going to go away. The providers have got significant challenges in terms of meeting that post-COVID recovery. And also, in terms of coming together in collaboratives for the first time, themselves will be taking on commissioning roles, and that's a new role for providers. So what I'm saying is there is an opportunity for CSU staff to think about how we can support provider collaboratives in their emerging commissioning roles and in their recovery plans and in supporting them in those recovery plans. And that tells me that there may well be more people needed, more than we think and perceive, as we move into July and beyond. And let's not forget, ICBs, ICSs are completely new organisations. They are not merged CCGs. They will not and cannot be a simple merge of CCGs and crack on with the commissioning process as it has happened in the past. They will have new responsibilities. They will have new obligations and new accountabilities, and we will be able to take the opportunity to support them in all of those areas. And let's not forget that July the 1st is the date that they all come together and the legal step is taken. It's going to be 1, 2, possibly 3 years before ICBs are fully functioning. And in those 3 years, they need to be both developing, but also delivering on the services that they need to be delivering on in terms of those obligations, accountabilities and responsibilities. And that to me says that people are going to be needed, but will also be needing to work in partnership to make that happen. No one organisation is going to get the NHS to where it needs to be from where it is today. Also bear in mind that CSUs have been now a constant in the system for the last 10, 11, 12 years, depending on where your CSU started its journey. there's been continual change in those 10 years. We were brought together to be competitive animals, fight each other and anybody else that wanted business. We're now in that turnaround. The brakes have come on quickly, and we're becoming collaborative organisations. But let's just reflect on the fact that when CSUs kicked off in 2013, there were 23 CSUs. There are now 4. The 4 that are remaining, you represent today around this table. We've become strong, resilient and robust organisations. Our services are increasingly being demanded, and we have widened the service offer that we have had and have got. And the reason I say that again comes back to COVID. And this is quite a challenging thing for me to say. The pandemic was truly awful, and for too many people it was tragic, but it provided the bridge for CSUs in our marketplace to cross the bridge from pure commissioning support to wider system support. And I know for a fact from the discussions that have been going on nationally around the CSU strategy, which I'll come to in a moment, the flexibility and the responsiveness and the reaction and the professionalism CSUs supporting all parts of the system during the pandemic has gone down really well and played a massive part in convincing top of shop at NHSEI that CSUs were an important part of the system and that there needed to be a strategy and that our services and our staff needed protection. Don't just hang on to those thoughts for a moment and I'll come back to you on that. So my view is that CSUs are now an important part of the system. In some respects, in early years, we were almost tolerated. We're not tolerated now. We've found our place. And all of these are excellent foundations for us to build on. In many ways, unique and most definitely positives to dwell on in times of change. And please do that. Please try to think more positively for those of you that are thinking a little bit negatively. I'll just finish with some words on the CSU national strategy. The first thing to say is that commissioning intentions were required from ICBs on the 29th of April. Those have gone in largely. There's a few stragglers who still haven't submitted as far as I know. I know from my own CSU's perspective, I don't know anything else, those commissioning intentions are very positive indeed. We have a year of stability for 22-23. Those submissions support the discussions that I've had with ICB chief execs, which talk about stability during 22-23 and a forum for us to talk about what needs to change for 23-24 and beyond to ensure that CSUs are both a part of the game, but also are relevant and current and impactful in terms of the services that we provide to those ICBs. So I'll finish by saying, are we ever going to be in a risk-free environment? No. Are we always going to be in a change environment? Yes. Is there likely to be change in terms of what CSUs are asked to do? Without a shadow of a doubt. Are we likely to be in demand given the wide breadth of experience, capacity and capability that we have? In my view, absolutely. We may end up doing something different than we've done in the past for our money, but I still think, still believe that the future for CSUs is bright and will be stable once more once we've gone through the next 2 or 3 years. Hopefully that's helped me.
Thank you, Derek. I think you make some really good points there. You know, in terms of change affects everyone differently, and we'll all be in different places at different times. But it is important that we don't lose sight that we are valued individuals who have, you know, technical skills that are important to the system. And that things aren't going to change overnight either, that there will be transitional change, and that we work for organisations who have proved themselves as being able to adapt to change very well and that we're an important part of the wider system of the NHS, and the value and the skills that we can bring to that as organisations as well. I'll just make a bit of a plea while we're trying to get the next speaker to join us, because Derek, you actually were quicker than we anticipated you being in terms of the amount of time we'd given you.
Can we talk about something else?
You can do if you want to fill the time.
I have to be a little bit honest here. I have a very critical inner ear, and this is my first day back after leave. I might not have been entirely match fit during that presentation, for which I do apologise. But if you want to fill the space with questions now, rather than have a pause in the middle of this event, then I'm happy to take questions now.
Thanks, Derek. So feel free to either put your hand up or just shout out, or if you don't feel that confident, you can ask questions in the chat as well for Derek.
Ian.
Hello. Sorry, I'll just
Hi,
put
Ian.
on. Hiya, Derek. Thanks very much for that. I mean, it's reassuring in a way, like you mentioned, around more collaborative working with the system, and you touched on providers. So it's kind of a little bit more reassuring from my perspective that we're not just fixated now on providing services to commissioners. The only thing that I'd just like to relay, it's more just feedback, is I presume 95% of staff have only worked on the commissioning side before, so it creates a little bit of angst still, in a way that, oh yeah, there might be more jobs available for us, but then working in a provider, from my perspective, is a completely different work culture to that of commissioners. So it kind of relieves some kind of fear as to the perspective of, oh gosh, there might not be roles available to us, to more, oh right, okay, well there could be, but it could be doing something completely different to what we've done before, which some people will grasp and will really go, oh, this is a great opportunity for me to get a wider experience of the NHS. Whereas I think some people might be a little bit more angst now to go, oh gosh, a completely different culture that I might be working in the next 12 months. I just wanted to kind of read that as such.
I get that, Ian. I get that, I will use the quip that I always use at this point of discussion. My wife refers to me as a change junkie, so I probably have a different perspective on it to other people. I think the two or three things I would say is, one, finance is finance. Ultimately, we can, as I said at the start of or during my opening piece, processes may be different. Relationships may be different, which goes to your point about cultures, etc. But ultimately, the principles of finance, both in terms of getting some numbers out and in terms of using those numbers to assure, those principles are the same, whether it's commissioning, whether it's providing, or whether it's making sure that Ryanair can stay afloat, whichever, up in the air. What I wouldn't discount is continuing to do the job from where you are now, because nobody's saying yet, and nobody said to me that I need in my CSU to be losing finance people. People may wish to go and try and work in other parts of the system, and that's great, because people will develop their careers the way that they do. But if we're in a world where we continue to work as a CSU, but happen then to be providing services or working with, in a better way to put it, really, working with commissioning colleagues and providing colleagues, then the base culture that you're working from is your own organisation's culture. Where the challenge comes is making sure that we can interface with the different cultures that we have seen in the past in commissioners and providers. And I'm not painting one side of the fence bad and one side good. I think you'll see a mixture of behaviours, whichever side of the divide that you work on. There are many commissioners in this world, and there are many providers in this world. They can't all be behaving the same way. So that will be my reflection on that. Very rare you see significant decrease in finance professionals. That's my cheeky little comment. Very rare do you see that. So yeah, I wouldn't take on too much. I hope that helps, Ian.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Andrew has actually joined us now, who is our next speaker. Andrew, welcome. We'll hand over to Andrew shortly. What I would say is, if any of you have any further questions that you would like to ask Derek, or you think you'd like to ask Andrew as he's going through his presentation as well, pop them in the chat. There is time at the end of the presentations to ask them before we take a short comfort break. So I will hand over to Andrew.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, everybody, for I would say for inviting me here, but I'm here slightly by accident, and some of the eagle-eyed amongst you would have actually noticed that I'm not actually a networker. Not even my weekend name will cover me for that. And this is where you get your first insight to the provider land as it currently stands. In fact, that Annette has unfortunately had to attend a court hearing on behalf of the FT today and for the next few days. So many of her engagements and such like have been either stopped or passed on. And this was one she felt, rather than, I think she offered it up saying, we can cancel or you can accept a stand-in or we can do something else. I think she felt it was something to, if we could do, that it was important we supported in the way we move forward. So one of the many things I'm representing Annette for this week, and I'll see if I can get the PowerPoint to actually share.
Andrew, can I just say while you're doing that, thank you for stepping into the breach at short notice. It is really appreciated, and I'm sure, you know, all the colleagues on this call will really value getting the provider perspective. So thank you.
Yeah, I can add that on behalf of the 4 CSU MDs as well, Andrew. Thank you so much for this.
Yeah, I may have struggled with this. It's not finding the right presentation. It's one I did earlier on Friday. Just bear with me a second. I'll just take that one down. Oh, you can never find the off buttons. Apologies. If I find the off button, I'll do it. Technology and me. It's a place where you could all come in and teach us something.
Quick, do a pitch.
Oh, yeah, stop. Oh. I'm not quite sure why it's still sharing something there, because from my end, it stopped sharing. It's not there.
Andrew, what I'll do is I'll try and share something, and then hopefully that will override what you've got on screen, and then you can try again, if that makes sense.
Lynn, I think I have the slides. I can share my screen if that's helpful.
Yes, that would be great. Thank you.
2 seconds. Let me just find the presentation.
Just bear with us all. As you know, technology can be brilliant, and then it can also be frustrating. So just bear with us while we sort this out. I'm sure it'll only take a minute or so.
Sorry, then I'm just looking for them. Becky said she saved them in the folders, but I can't see them. So I've just checked with her if they're in there.
Just checking everyone's still there.
We're all still here, Andrew.
Well, I suppose did have a little bit of time to waste, unfortunately. So thanks, Derek. You managed to give us the time to wrap up. I'm not even sure how long. As I'm standing into this, I didn't actually see the presentation till earlier on today. So hopefully I will do it justice.
I'm sure you will. I'm just wondering if we could take the question from Heather whilst to give you a bit of time to you and Megan to try and sort the slides out. So Heather popped a question into the chat box. Thanks for that, Heather. Is it the intention of the ICBs to continue to use SBS and Oracle for the ledger? On point of transfer, yes, it is. The ICBs will use what we have been using previously. Love it or hate it, I think it's fair to say. We probably all have views on ISFE as it is at the moment. Just so you're all aware, and I'm sure quite a few of you will know this bit, however, NHS England are out to tender anyway and are going through a procurement exercise at the moment, looking at a replacement well, not necessarily a replacement provider, but are going through a procurement exercise to ensure that we've got the right solutions for the future. That was going to happen whether we transferred to ICBs or not. That piece of work had already started before that legislative change came out. So Heather, I hope that answers your question. Give me a thumbs up, or if it doesn't, pop another question into the chat. And I'll take it from there. We've got another question that has come in from Tracy. Thank you, Tracy. Do you think some of the staff within the CSUs are going back in-house to the ICS/ICB? So Derek, do you, I think Tracy's asking about, do we envisage some of the staff within the CSUs could go back in-house to the ICS or ICB?
Yes, I do, please.
I guess
Thanks,
you would.
Tracy.
I guess you would never say never. But I think I go back to a comment I made. The CSU strategy that I mentioned earlier, the national strategy, which has got has got a strong governance wrapped around it. Richard Barker, the regional director in the North East, is the SRO for this, and the just to add as well, in terms of that Julian Kelly recognises the ability, the strength, and the capabilities of CSUs. CSU's reputation at board level has never been higher than it is right now, and for that reason, they came up with a strategy, asked for a strategy, wanted a strategy. There's never been a CSU strategy since day one, national strategy, and that strategy says, and I've seen this in black and white, that in-housing is not the default position when ICBs come to consider their support arrangements. And the reason why the commissioning intentions were asked for, that were submitted on the 29th of April that I mentioned earlier, was to get a measure for if there was any significant risk to services being in-housed by ICBs. And as I say, I didn't see anything in the ones related to my CSU, our CSU, that led me to believe there will be any in-housing, or at least any significant in-housing of services and therefore staff. Can't talk for the other CSUs because I haven't seen their returns, and that's quite right and proper. But the MDs together felt, along with the CSU transition team, that there was unlikely to be anything significant in terms of service in housing. So that's the position as I see it. There is a lot of talk, as I mentioned earlier, about increasing stability and removing any destabilising effect in terms of ICBs moving forward. And there can be nothing more destabilising than staff being moved around organisations. But I won't say never, because I would, you can't discount it 100%. But I think I would say this: the chances of mass in-housing of staff is far, far, far less today than maybe it was 3 or 4 years ago. Does that help?
Yeah, that's lovely. Thanks, Derek.
Thanks, Derek. Also, thank you, Becky, for getting the presentation up and sorting it out. So I'll hand over to you now, Andrew.
Thanks, Len, and thank you, Becky. Now, if you go to the next slide, I covered off that I'm not a networker. I am, in fact, Andy Chilton. I'm the Operational Director of Finance at the FT. In Bolton, we do like to do things a little bit differently, and Annette has a fairly unique position around there in the fact that she is the Chief Finance Officer for both the FT and the CCG. She has worn the CCG hat previously. She then moved over to manage the local trust and is now back over managing both of them financially. And it's proposed within Bolton as a place base that would continue forward as the place that she would be the financial lead for the whole of Bolton going forward. So what we'd like to probably cover in this is what it was like working in a provider pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, post-pandemic, a quick flip through some of those, the financial metrics that we would commonly all use, some of those pressures and concerns that we do have in providers. Derek's covered on a few of the issues already and highlighted them. I'll just go into a few of those definitely in a bit more detail, hopefully, and the key reporting requirements going forward, and hopefully with ample time for any questions you have on what it's currently like working in a provider land and whether you'd even like to have a go at that, because I would welcome many more people to come and join us. If you go to the next slide, please, Becky. Well, in that world that seems so long ago now, back in February 2020, when we were just getting to grips with what was going on, we just put new regime was proposed for the coming year. We're trying to finalise the financial plans. There was financial recovery funding being offered to certain NHS organisations, but not to others. The balance was there. NHSI was changing its focus and where it was going. New approach to capital was being proposed, and a new approach to contracting and moving away from PBR contracting was being proposed from the commissioning side, and we were just starting to get scripts to that with no finalised plan when left field, little did you know, but COVID came along and knocked that all out of the park. At that point, before it all happened, at Bolton, we were already in a fairly unique position again, as a few years previous, due to the combative approach that Derek referred to, which had got excessive within Bolton, and we only communicated in legal letters. We did get to the stage where there was about 12 people engaged in each organisation just to try and trip the other one up. But we moved forward from that. The two DOFs got together and decided it was a silly thing to do, and peace reigned. And as part of that, they came up with what's been known as the aligned incentive contract across the system, which is a precursor for many of the contracts we're seeing being offered around now, in which it divided the contract into buckets of things in pure blocks, things with incentives to increase them, things which were totally variable or pass through. And there was these various buckets, and we'd manage through those allocations. And the CCG undertook that they wouldn't do any changes without the agreement of the FT. The FT agreed it'd be open book, looking at what we did, how we did it, and any changes would be done at the rates that we could afford to lose the money, irrespective of full rate moves. I know vice versa, they'd even look at increases at marginal rates as well. That was fairly unique in its time, and it did lead to us getting a HFMA award for it. And also Annette at the same time became HFMA DOF of the Year for the engagement that went on in how two organisations could come together for the better. And also now that's been adapted fairly nationally, the approach that people want to see. So we were in that good position at the start with a really good relationship that had been going on for 2 or 3 years previous when COVID hit. So post-pandemic, sorry, during the pandemic, the next slide, please, Becky. It was mayhem, I think it's fair to say. Those first 3 months, when the financial plans went out the window, when NHSI was trying to issue control totals, everyone was trying to question if they had enough money. Your governance structures went out the window. Everyone was told, get everyone you can possible working, ignore the insurance issues, put them wherever you can, get everything going. Don't worry about business case processes, buy what you need. And it probably was like the old Wild West for a few months, where everyone was just going gung-ho. Everyone was after the same resources. And you realise soon after that you did need to collaborate. We couldn't all go try and outbid each other to buy masks for people to wear. You couldn't go into an inflationary thing there. We needed to share resources across the system. We needed to share the pain that was about to hit us. But it did actually have some other untoward benefits. Things which would have took years to change in the past or to get people to buy into happened overnight. I know we'd looked at the idea of people working from home and how that might work, remote working, agile working. And we'd been looking at that for a year or two already. And we haven't got very far. A few people have got bits and bobs of it. But overnight, the staff were at home working, logging in, doing most of the jobs. We had minimal staff on site. And we found it worked. We could trust people. We didn't need 101 different processes and systems to check it worked out. We actually just did it, checked it, tweaked it, and kept going. And we learned a whole new method there of going about how to do change management, that if you wait for it to be perfect, you'll never do it. And sometimes you just got to jump in there. Don't worry too much about setting all the rules. Have much more how you set your rules of engagement with each other, how you're going to act with each other, and set the behaviours you want, and then try and work out where it's not working, improve it, stop things that I shouldn't be doing, start other things, give people a chance to try new things, see if it works. If not, try something else. The other thing that became big during that time, it's not on that slide there, is the way we viewed our staff, not just with the trust, but also the checking in, the well-being. Well-being became a much bigger item on the agenda than it had been previously. Making sure everyone's okay, making sure that they're getting what they need, doing daily check-ins. We changed the way we did our one-to-ones with people, so that the first 20 minutes had to be about how are you, not what you're doing. So you could actually find out that everything was working okay, give people a chance to talk about it, because suddenly they went from working in an office with everyone around them, daily chatter, to sat at home with a screen, maybe silence behind them. So well-being, mental health, and all tools like that became a much more important part of my job in trying to look after the staff as opposed to previously. But it did reduce our bureaucracy. It did mean we got on and tried things. Some things failed, some things worked. The one thing we did lose was that approach of people working together, people bouncing ideas off each other. We lost a focus on our efficiency and productivity, and that went out the window. We weren't anywhere near as productive for lots of reasons. We've delivered very little efficiency measures over the last 2 years. But we've got virtual appointments out of that as well. Tech, digital, the amount of investment and improvement in them. Consultants who weren't buying into a product, of having patients log in from home and speak to them at a time that was convenient for the patient, are suddenly doing it and have adapted to it. We've got radiologists able to work from home and look at x-rays on machines we've set in their houses, and they don't need to come into work to do that, or they can do it all the time. So despite all the horrid things that have happened during COVID, there have been some very positive things that have come out in the way we work and the way we approach change and the way we approach working together and as a system, which brings us to a precursor to our next slide on the post-pandemic. So as Derek's already pointed out, as we move forward, this is not just about commissioners. This is not just about providers. This is not a split. This won't be just one big CCG and lots of providers and something going on. This will be one organisation. They'll be place-based. That provider-commissioner split goes, and the provider-provider combative nature with our neighbours, that goes. These are all new things to learn. We have little bits of them, but how to play nice together in this sandpit with the other organisations is a difficult one. Learning that trust again, when my two near neighbour trusts are gigantic, they're multi-billion-pound trusts. We're about a £500 million trust, so, and other ones around our as well. So there's that whole nature of that relationship of us together, of whether what are they trying to get out of it? Do we trust they're going to do things? If I offer up something, is everyone else offering it up? And there is that whole idea of how to work together in an integrated care system that we're struggling with at the moment, and the governance structures and how we get over that lack of trust. If we all go to the bottom, race to the bottom on, we don't trust each other, the system will fail. So it has to be building those relationships, working with the CSUs, working with the former commissioning organisations, working with our previous competitor trusts, neighbouring trusts, in order for doing what's best for the patients of our the residents of our ICB and the patients of the hospitals. So I've often heard it said that we're coming back to some normality, we're returning to the normal, but I challenge that one. And again, Derek's change is inevitable. We've opened the genie. There's no going back to what we did. There's only moving forward now and enhancing what we have done and making it better and work better. We're trying to move forward in a system where the return to normal is a brand new normal. We have no reference period. We have nothing to fall back on to say this is the way we should do it. Everything is open for interpretation. Everything is open for change. And just the way that we all work together. In particular, the things that we're doing front and centre, because we have to, the elective recovery and working across the system. No longer are we as a provider viewed in our own performance rights. Whether we as Bolton break even or make a surplus is irrelevant. It's how the whole system does, all the system together, including the commissioners and the trusts. And that's the same with the elective recovery targets. We have to do 110% of our 1920 elective work by volume and 104% by value. But we won't be measured individually. We'll be measured as a whole system. And that's a whole new way of thinking, relying on the performance of our fellow organisations to see if we can get some extra cash, or even if we lose cash, if we don't hit those targets. As a system, we've set a financial envelope to live within, and that financial envelope was to cover all the organisations within it. As it stands at the moment within the system I'm in and the ones locally, the commissioning arm of it is managing to produce break-even budgets, but the provider arms are struggling to get to break-even in the way it stands, and also about how to work together to bridge that gap across the whole system, with the whole remit of chief executives and directors of finance struggling with how to work together to achieve that. On top of that, there's all the convergence trajectories, which were a pre-pandemic offering of how we've evened up the allocations across the whole national system, which seems to have a bigger impact on some systems than others. And that coming out of COVID, it's like, how do we cope with that? Particularly in the role with IPC and the impact of productivity in the system. What do we do? How do we deal with it? COVID hit the Northwest a lot harder than some other areas. It usually hit it first and lasted a bit longer. So we're still coping with what impact that has, not just on current performance, but long-term health needs of the people of the Northwest. That then moves us into our new position, some of the financial metrics, which as a system we're bound by. So next slide, please. I think I might just have to keep hitting return a few times. So I've mentioned ERF, elective recovery funding. It's coming into the system. 132 million is in the GM system for that money to be over all the organisations, but we can lose 90 million of that if we don't hit the 104% target as a system. BPPC, very important to all organisations, and you're only very aware of this. Got to hit 95%, and the amount of cash that's in the system, there's a lot of pressure on providers who have historically not hit the 95% to do that with all the cash they've got. Why aren't we able to do it? It should be. We can't blame not having money in the bank anymore, because we come on to cash there. I know how much cash we've got in the bank. It's way more than we had pre-COVID. And across the whole of the Northwest, the bank accounts at the year end were holding nearly 2.5 billion in them, which is up 300 million on the year before. So there's a significant amount of cash in the system. Efficiency, it's been high in the past, very low over the last couple of years due to COVID. But as a system, we're now facing a 5% CIP to achieve our budgets and break evens. Variable pay has gone through the roof. It's trebled in our organisation. The rates we're paying have increased significantly, yet we're still understaffed. and it's trying to square those off. There's not enough money, we can't afford it, there's not enough staff. We're told to increase our staff as a pressure. We're told to not shut any beds as a pressure nationally. So you then go into, well, how do we get the CIP, the efficiency out, if we can't tackle the number of nurses we've got, we can't tackle the number of beds we've got, we can't tackle the number of medical staff we've got. That's 70% of our costs, which we can't even look at other than for productivity. And there comes a big one. Model hospital and other benchmarking type statistics will definitely show you that the productivity of the NHS is probably about 20% lower than it was 2 years ago. Reasons for that are fairly well documented, but it is those inefficiencies that were brought in due to the measures during COVID. Social distancing, mask wearing, numbers of people that are available on the list, recovery, and then the overlay of that onto the beds and how we manage beds and getting the flow through the hospital and getting the patients out of hospital and into community beds is significant. In Greater Manchester, we currently have 1,000 patients in hospital, equivalent of a decent sized hospital, who have no criteria to reside. Pre-pandemic, that was around 300. So we've taken out over a hospital's worth of beds, patients that don't need to be there, and increased costs accordingly. Theatres aren't as efficient as they were. Outpatient clinics are making up for their efficiencies. The beds we have all new pathways. It used to just be, have you got a male bed, a female bed? Then you were splitting them surgical, medical. Now you have to overlay on there if you're on a green pathway. An amber pathway is someone who's had COVID or recovering from COVID. A COVID pathway, someone who's had flu, someone who's not had flu, someone who's got, and just now there's a myriad. So from 4 ways of managing your beds, we're now up to about 26 ways you can manage your beds within the same bed cohort, which makes it very hard to manage your productivity again. Capital, left that one to last because it's fun. The capital regime has changed. It's gone to a system level again. It's very tight on your own money, which is difficult. We're in a system that has a lot of cash that's been set aside for capital projects, but we're now not allowed to spend it. But there's lots and lots of money nationally. At the end of last year, we as just one organisation got 16 million given to us from the NHSI in the last 2 months to spend on capital projects before the 31st of March. That was interesting to try and get that done and enable us to buy things that an auditor could view. But those sorts of system pressures and, for want of a better word, lack of clarity and management and planning from the top of the NHS about what funds they had and how to give them out, that we got to 2 months of the year to go and they were handing out millions and millions of pounds to organisations, telling them they had to spend it in the next 8 weeks, was just horrific. And if there's anything we ever want to give up to the top of the tree again, it's please don't do that again. On top of the measures there that they're looking at is the fact that I know NHS have already told us they're very, very, very interested in the levels of provisions and accruals that we have on our balance sheet. Again, they went up about 400 million locally over the last year. So they're looking at our deficits and our problems we're saying for the coming year, while looking at the significant amount of cash, increasing the provisions and increasing accruals, and challenging us, quite rightly, on why do we think we don't have enough money in the system to pay for things this year, when it's obvious we didn't spend all the money they gave us last year. So those are some of the significant challenges we're facing on metrics. Provider concerns and issues. Next, please, Becky. As mentioned, and also Derek mentioned there, the amounts of pressures that are currently in the system. COVID has been more accepted into the system. Changes have come onto IPC to allow us to return to some of that pre-pandemic levels of efficiency and productivity. But we're not quite there, and we won't be for a while yet. Our A&E attendances bounced back massively after COVID. Before COVID, our A&E locally, a busy day would have been about 300 attendances. Currently, a busy day is about 450 attendances, and an average day now is about 380. So there's been that significant spike in what we call sort of like the digital generation, who they're very much from Amazon they don't want to wait 2 weeks for a doctor's appointment. They want to see somebody now, and they're prepared to wait 4 hours in an A&E to see somebody rather than wait a week to see their actual GP. That's put a lot of pressure in the system for people who don't really need to be at A&E. Urgent care suffering, mentioned the bed flow issues earlier, elective recovery and backlog recovery that's in there, trying to increase the amount of patients we put through the trust. Staffing is a big issue for all the NHS. There isn't enough qualified doctors and nurses, so we're all fishing in the same pool for these numbers of staff that don't exist. And even if they increase the training and workforce metrics now to go out there, it will be 3 or 4 years before we start to see any real benefits of those increased numbers. That culture in the system is a big one. Moving away from PBR, breaking that linkage with organisations, block contracts, breaking the linkage that I've delivered loads of work, I need extra cash, I'll make a surplus. Thinking about what's good for the system, trusting each other when we're doing that. At the same time, linked to whatever the expectations of the public are, which mentioned in A&E. They want different things from us now. They've got different expectations of the NHS than the previous generations. The integration with social care and other partners. As at Bolton, we're in a unique position. We're fairly integrated with the CCG. We work with the council, but there's still a lack of information flow between ourselves and the council. There's still a lot of way to go to work with those partners and other third sector partners in the system when we're being place-based. There's a lot of things to go on about how we work together across the whole system with organisations that cross boundaries. They're responsible in many systems. And transformation. We've never been brilliant at transformation. We've been very good at changing things and spending loads more money. We've not been very good at transforming things and actually stopping spending money. We add it on as another layer and then absorb it and expand again. I think that alludes to where Derek is, as I'm talking about the finance staff. You never see an actual real reduction in staff on the end of these. There's always something new that comes along, which meant by the end of it, you needed more people than when you started. And all those people you thought you were getting rid of, half of them are back on as consultants and the rest are you're going out there and you're looking at adverts for jobs that have got a new title with them. Next slide, please, Becky. That leads us into the key reporting over the system that the Director of Finance is the centre of. There's all the internal reporting that was always there. We've got divisions, we've got the trust board with the finance department, we've got the auditors that we're playing out to as an external body, and the internal auditors which weren't on there. So we've got to do all the various reporting for them. They want to know what's going on in their own divisions and their own budgets and managing those, which are really awkward because we don't know what the norm is. So setting budgets has been fun this year, not quite knowing what levels of activity people were going to do, what costs we'd get staff in at, whether we could even recruit them. Our finance and information committee, our governance for the board, they're very interested in everything that's going on, the plans, the risk, and how we interact with the system. Risk management has taken on a whole new level. I think virtually every risk I've put onto the risk register so far this year has been a brand new style of risk that we've never had on previously. Most of them to do with the NHSI and system working and the risks that we've got as an organisation, which we don't have full control over because they're system level. So these are whole new things that we're trying to learn internally about how we take control of these in the future and work together. The annual accounts, planning, monthly reporting externally. Adding on the system to it now has added a new level. Previously, we'd do our internals, then send off the info to NHSI. Now we've got a place master who wants to see the figures before they go up on there. So it's shortened our time and performance deadlines to get information out. We've got a whole new level of people that are scrutinising what we're putting forward and asking us to sometimes make changes before it's then pulled together as a system and put forward to NHSI as the system totals. So that new level of reporting in there. And that then leads into the whole governance of the system. Those governance structures that support the system are in their infancy. The management structures that are over this, the people are only just being appointed now, these organisations that come live in July. I think 1 or 2 of our new board won't even technically be in post when it comes to the 1st of July. Yet they're having to make decisions about the way it will look, the way people's roles are, what's going to go on. And I can understand there's a lot of angst in the system because this change feels a lot different to all those changes that have gone on in the past. But we are where we are. It seems fairly safe comparatively in provider land, but the pressures are there. There's no shortage of staff in there. If you looked over GM there, the amount of adverts that are out for roles, the amount of temporary staff I know that are in the system, across the system, is horrendous. I just like to think that we're all adults. We all do actually prefer to work together in harmony in systems. We do it in Bolton. We like to do it everywhere else. The CSU in Manchester, I was the chair of the Greater Manchester Deputies Committee, and the CSU were always at our provider meetings. They were never out there because they were seen as something that dealt across the system, not just with commissioners and not just there. They had issues and knowledge that could benefit us in provider land as well. So I think most systems now are starting to mature properly and move forward with those relationships, but they are all in a lot of cases in their infancy. And at that point, I will cease and go to the last slide, which goes, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Andrew, especially stepping into the breach with a presentation that you hadn't pulled together. Really interesting to listening to both you and Derek, because there was some key themes and messages that were coming out from me. The pandemic drove change faster and harder than I think we've ever had to change before, and we won't return to a pre-pandemic world. We need to embrace those changes that have occurred, and we need to embed what's good from them and learn from them. Staff wellbeing and welfare is critical, and to the NHS as a whole, how efficiency is going to be important moving forward, and we can't shy away from that. But at the heart of it is ICSs are new. They're not just big CCGs, and we need to stop thinking of them, oh, it's a merger of so many CCGs. And the collaboration is going to be key and critical for everyone within the system. And the days of competing with each other and challenging each other, we need to be focusing on what gets the best outcomes for people ultimately. And that message came through really loudly in both of your presentations, so thank you. We've got about 5-10 minutes now, so open it up again to questions. Feel free to drop them in the chat or to put your hands up if you've got questions for either Andrew or Derek. While we're giving people time to think, I guess there was a question from me for both of you really about what are your top priorities for the next 12 to 18 months? Where's your focus and attention for the next 12 to 18 months? So start with you, maybe Andrew.
Okay. Significant first one there is break it into the two things. The one is about our system and managing risk in the system and that relationship with, in particular, the other providers in the system, about how we work together to make sure we get the best there, that we don't, all of us in most of us actually, is one not, are FTs, so you've got your own licenses about how you act, and they've not changed the law on those yet you're beholden to both the system and to NHSI, and it's about convincing your boards about how we need to play together with the other organisations, and what might be previously been detrimental to your own organisation is best for the system. But then how does the system cope with you not running out of cash as an individual organisation, or you're not, there's not things that are done that are detrimental then to people of the local place side of it. And that equal access across the whole system is something that's driving a lot of conversations currently, because across GM, people will have better access to some services in another area. And it's how do you even up that playing field of equality of access to people in the system. So that level of it, how do we balance the books and do that? Internally, the 3 buckets, you've got the how do I get my managers back focused on productivity, back focused on control of costs. For the last 2 years, it's literally been spend what you can. We've tried to keep some, is that the best thing to buy? Can you buy that cheaper? But it is literally, if you need it, you want it, you get it. And move on for that. And if you need to get staff to do something, you can keep upping the pay rates till someone will do it. We can't afford to do that now. We can't, there's not enough money in the system. So it's like, how do we get that focus back with the managers? Most of my senior managers are new to that role. They've been in organisations, but they've not been in that big seat before, except during the pandemic. So there's a whole new learning process of educating these managers of what the future will bring and how they need to manage their budgets and control things. And the final one is, and possibly the biggest, is the staff. And I don't just include the staff at the FT here, it's the staff at across the whole of the Bolton system. We're at pains to say we want to take care and look after the people we've been working with for the last few years. We want the CCG staff that no matter who they end up working for or doing, that they feel comfortable, and we want them to work with us. We want to get the best out of them. We want them to be seen as part of the place-based answer to all of this. And so we're working closely with our own staff and with the CCG about how we support this level of change, how we support this move forward into the new regime, that the staff can feel as comfortable as they can and supported as they can, and also how we support that everybody still continue to work from home and bring in new ways of working and actually formalise all that as we go forward.
Great, thank you, Andrew. Derek? Derek, you're on mute, just so you know.
Of teams. Yeah, lots of synergy with what Andrew said there. I just thought it was a great presentation, really good presentation. So thanks for that. I really respect this slide for stuff, and it was so good. In terms of what my 3 priorities are over the next 12, 18 months, 2 years, whatever. One is clearly to continue the securing the stability for the CSU and supporting the other CSUs in that stability, whatever that stability is, through the change period that we've got. The part of that, which would be my number 2, is ensuring the CSU works in a much more multidisciplinary way than it has in the past. You know, we've been very fortunate to have 60 odd million pounds in the past, a number slightly higher than that of recurring contract values, but we have been building, if you like, consultancy income or pipeline income as we call it, or non-recurring income as it used to be when I wore short trousers, coming in for projects, short-term projects. That's going to be bigger in the future, so we need to get our people working in a more multidisciplinary way rather than in a single service way, should I say. And then the third one, and it's exactly the same as the one Andrew articulated, but slightly different, certainly with a different accent and probably a different articulation, is I want the organisation to be more attractive to potential staff. I want the organisation to be more caring than it has been in the past, and I think we've done a good job. And most certainly, I need the organisation to be more equitable. So, in terms of the attractive, I want us to be able to attract people into the organisation from populations we do not historically recruit from. We've got 200 plus people who work in our organisation who've never met anybody in the organisation other than on a screen. That means that we need to up our game in terms of caring for people, and I am absolutely determined that we remove the glass ceilings for people who don't get the development, don't get into positions that they should get into, and that all happens for the wrong reason. So those are my 3 professional targets over the next 3 years. My personal ones will leave for another day.
Thanks, Derek. The point you raised about staff development links nicely onto a question that's just been asked from Michelle. where she's currently working in a senior role, a head of finance type role, and feels she's got lots of transferable skills, but is wanting to try and get into a trust, but is finding she's getting rejected on the basis she doesn't have recent trust experience. And she's asking, what can she do to convince trusts that actually the skills are there? So again, I'd ask both of you, what suggestions can you make for Michelle?
It is a tricky one, and I'm aware of this on many things, and it's something that when we have like a Northwest Goths get together, it's something that regularly comes up when you've got the provider and commissioning side on the same call about saying, how do people move across from one side to the other when they don't see there? Regionally and in the DOF1, we're at pains to say to all our people that are interviewing that the skills are transferable, that it's not about what you've been doing in your day job. It is literally about what Michelle's mentioned there. It's your skill set. And it's about, you can teach somebody about who the budget manager is and how to deal with those. It's having that right mindset and right skill set that's important to me, and making sure someone's going to be a fit with the team, and what their personal history is outside of that isn't there. It's like, can you transfer those skills? And I would always say there are numerous transferable skills from both sides of the tree. If you want to hit someone to hit the ground running, yes, you're always going to go, oh, who's got 5 years provider experience? But we kicked out of our job descriptions years ago that NHS experience and senior management experience and provider experience as essentials, because it was preventing non-NHS and other people and getting your hands on people who have new skills and new ways of working to develop with you. I can say, Michelle, is keep at it. If you can find a decent employment consultant, we have a few in the Northwest who I work with, who help me sift through and approach people like yourself who might not think of a place, and convince me saying they've got the skills. I'd take a punt on them. And I deal regularly with one employment agency who do all this for us, just to make sure we're not missing out on people like Michelle and we're not fishing in the same pool all the time. Because all we get then is people who reinforce the ideas we've already got, rather than questioning and challenging the ways we work and moving us forward. So without that new blood, without those new ways of thinking, we're dead. And that might be an avenue into these people. Ring them up before the interview, talk to them about what your skill set is, tell them about what brilliant things you can bring to them as an organisation, tell them that you've got a different way of thinking or way to approach a problem that would benefit them, and add to their skill sets they've already got, rather than going with the people you've already got and having more of the same. You need someone different to challenge you.
You're on mute now, Lynn.
Damn it. Derek, I was going to say, anything else you'd like to add?
There's not much more I would add. All I would, maybe two or three quick things. One is the network. Put yourself out there. I know it's COVID, or we're in the tail end of the COVID pandemic, so this is a little bit counterintuitive, but network with all parts of the system. Make sure you're known. Maybe go on some courses, maybe go on some developmental days, maybe get into system-wide meetings, get yourself known. Make sure that your CV comes back to the employment consultant piece, highlights those skills that are so transferable, and also hang on to the fact you're an accountant. Accountants are accountants. Finance staff are finance staff. The skills are transferable. But so that's what I would add to what Andrew said. Mainly the networking piece, but also make sure your CV screams out. I'm a finance professional here, and I can work anywhere as well as I can. But you do a slight aside here, just to add a bit of, if I may, take 2 minutes. I joined the NHS finance function from a bus company, and no, I wasn't a driver, and I wasn't a conductor, I was an accountant. And on my end of my first week, somebody shouts out, "What's the cost of an MLSO?" And I shot up my head and said, depending on conditions, somewhere between 80 and 95,000 pound. And this was in 1986. And the other senior accountant in the room looked at me and thought the new kid had gone, or the new bloke had gone a bit, off the rails. But of course, where I was before in the health service, where I was before in the bus service, a MLSCO was a midlife service overhaul for a bus, not a medical laboratory scientific officer. So you do have to be careful with the language sometimes. But just keep going away, Michelle, and just make sure you network and get that CV screaming.
Absolutely. The one thing I guess I would add for you, Michelle, is explore looking for a mentor as well, and maybe a mentor who's from a trust background.
Sure.
And it builds on what Derek was saying about networking, because that gives you an opportunity to talk to people, and those people will talk to other people. So hopefully there's some ideas there to help you move forward as well, Michelle. We have run out of time, so could I ask everybody to show their appreciation and thanks to Derek and Andrew in the usual way. We are extremely grateful for you taking time out of your diary to come and spend with us today, so thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Hope it's been of some help to you. Thank you.
We've got a short break now. If you can be back at about past, that would be great. 3:30, that is. Short comfort break, and then we'll move on to the second half of the session. Thank you all.
Cheers. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Hi, Lynn.
Hi, Megan.
That went really well, I thought. First two sessions.
Yeah, it did.
Tell me about the
Really
slides.
good. Oh,
You had a bit of a nightmare on this end. I was like, I can't find them.
do you know what? I was actually just about to message Andrew in the background and say, do you want to email them to me? Because I thought you're clearly struggling. So don't
yeah. And then I was like, to Becky, I was like, please, can you come on here? Because I don't know why she had them. She had them to files, and then they went through the online, like OneDrive. It wasn't loading on my end, and then she sent me an email, and it's still not come through. So I don't know what's going on. So it's a bit of a nightmare, but we got there in the end.
James is running the session, isn't he, until 4:30? Is that right?
Yeah, and he'll facilitate it all. He's really good. He did our session earlier this morning, so yeah, he'll just join, and I guess you can introduce him, and then he can go from there. Yeah. He wants to do breakout rooms, but I don't know why MS Teams is playing up today. There's no option to do breakout rooms, and Becky just messaged me saying she can't see that she can do them either. So I'll drop it and give him a heads up.
I can't do them either.
I had a look as well, and I can't see them either. So
I just don't know why Teams has this function. It's so strange because usually, Becky, you create all our events, don't you? So
No, I don't know why I've not come up on this.
I don't know if Sophie maybe created this. I'll message her.
because it's normally just under the 3 dots, isn't it? There's the breakout. So hi, James. Oh, you're on mute.
Hello there. Hello.
We're having the same issues we were having this morning, but none of us can do breakout rooms in this.
Okay, we'll do that.
For some reason, is that going to really mess up your session? No.
People will have to talk as part of a big group.
That's okay. We've got a little less than we were expecting. So we've got 22, not including myself, Becky, and Lynn. So it's a bit of a smaller group. So hopefully that will be okay.
Okay.
We've just
James, the chat is working if you want people to pop things in the chat as well, maybe if people are a little bit reticent to speak up.
Okay, no problem. I have ways of making sure.
We've just
That sounds slightly scary.
No, I'm very friendly, as you can see.
Yeah, so we've just sent everyone on a little break. They'll be back in 2 minutes. It was just a quick comfort break. And then Lynn will welcome them back, introduce you, and then you can get going with your sessions.
Okay, no problem. Can I just try? Oh, right. Okay, that's fine.
Are you able to show your
Do something.
screen? Are you looking to share your screen?
Yeah. So can I just try something? So tell me if you can hear this video.
2 years ago, I lost my husband.
Brilliant, thank you. Good, all good.
I'm glad you can share your screen. We just had an issue of screen sharing. That's all good. Cool. I think we're ready to go.
Yeah, give people a couple of minutes and they'll be back shortly, hopefully.
Yeah.
So what have you just been running?
So we've had 2 speakers on this morning. We've had a managing director from one of the CSUs on, and we've had a senior finance colleague from one of the provider trusts on, talking really about what's happening in the CSU world, what's happening in the provider world, and what it means really. And there was some key themes that came out, key themes about, you know, staff and well-being is critical and at the heart of where we need to be. That change that happened in the pandemic was probably faster and harder than we'd ever experienced before, and there will be no going back completely. You know, we need to embrace what's good about that change, but also learn and make things better. That the new finance NHS regime is new. It's not about merging a few bits of things, and that collaboration is going to be key and critical for everyone in the system. That finance people have are professionals and have lots of skills, and you know, we shouldn't lose sight that those skills are in demand and that they're needed, and really that, you know, sorry, I've just jotted something down and then I've lost where I was on the page. From a CSU perspective, we've been in existence for 10 years now, and we've been through an awful lot of change. You know, there was 21 CSUs in the beginning, there's now only 4, but the 4 who are there actually are really high quality, high caliber organisations and have proved themselves adaptable and capable of change. And, you know, we did a little Slido at the beginning as well, asking people how they were feeling about the futures of CSU, which I can just pop on the screen if you'd like to see that quickly.
And then what happens after my bit? So when I've finished, do I hand back to you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Back to Lynn, okay.
I'm
and
hoping
you
can
do
just
anything
see that.
afterwards? Have
No,
you got more?
just a little wrap up. Yeah. I'm
Okay,
hoping you can see that, James. So the bigger the word is, the more often people put that word in, clearly.
Yeah.
And we talked briefly about there's a real range of feeling on there as well, but there's a lot of apprehension, unsure, unclear type words.
Yeah, great.
Okay, I'm hoping everyone is back with us. If people could give me some thumbs up so I know that people are back with us, that would be absolutely great. And I know I'm not talking into nothing. I can see a few thumbs coming up, so that's really great. Thank you. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce you to James. James is here to run the second half of our session. Welcome. And he's here to talk about how we manage change. So I will hand over to him and he can introduce himself and take us through the rest of the session.
Right, thank you, Lynn. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm going to talk to you for the next 50 minutes or so, and we're going to think about some of the factors around change that I don't know, make us feel a bit uneasy, some of the opportunities for change, and some of the strategies for how to deal effectively with change. I'm going to talk, I'm going to present some concepts, and I'm going to share some ideas and thoughts. As much as possible, it would be great to get some interaction with you as well. So there will be points of the session where I am going to sort of say, put your hand up if you can share a story or an anecdote or an opinion on this. And that would be really great if I could get some feedback from you as we go. I will start off by just sort of talking through a few concepts to start us off. And I'll share my screen. I've got some slides basically. So today we're going to look at what is change specifically, how do we react to it, and what are some of the reasons behind some of those reactions, when is change useful, and when is it difficult. I'm keen to explore really what we can get positively from change. I guess that's the point of managing it effectively. How we can engage in conversations with each other around the concept and topic of change so that we can help each other. How otherwise we can help each other change, help each other deal with some of the unsettling things, some of the unknowns, some of the difficult and unusual situations we'll be thrust into as a result of change. And then how can you make a positive action plan for dealing with change and for helping others through change as well? So that's our sort of agenda for the next hour or so. So hands up if you've heard of this concept of VUCA before. Raise a hand or wave or something like that. Just give us an indication. So we've got Michelle is the only person so far that's heard of this concept. It's one of these kind of business buzzwords where you've got volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And if you think about everything that we've been facing, certainly over the course of the pandemic, for example, but also in more recent history, we've got this situation of the war in Ukraine and how everybody's responding to that. The world is starting to look like a bit of a different place. So we've got lots and lots of volatility. We've got an energy crisis. We've got lots of differences in how we're having to work and how we're responding to some of the market and economy challenges, some of the ways that you'll be asked to do things for your stakeholders and customers and colleagues. A lot of uncertainty. So Lynn shared with me your Slido results, and I think that those kinds of themes, uncertainty and ambiguity, were really, really key within that. And then complexity as well. Work there's a lot more to it at the moment. There's a lot more that's influencing the decisions we have to make. There's a lot more factors that determine which route we should go and who we should deal with and who we should talk to and who we should consider and all kinds of things like that. So there's lots and lots of stuff to consider, and sometimes it might be difficult to get a grip of it and a grasp of it. And I think you can look at any sort of business book or any business post on LinkedIn or something like that, and it will tell you that we are experiencing a rate of change that is more rapid than any other time in history. And that may be true, but change isn't a new thing. If you look at some of these quotes on change, the measure of intelligence is the ability to change. Albert Einstein, 100 years or so ago. To improve is to change, to be perfect is to change often, Winston Churchill. And then further back, the secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. Socrates and Heraclitus, there's nothing permanent except change. And Lynn's taking my picture. Hi, Lynn. That's such a good slide for Lynn there. So yeah, I think that it's really interesting to think about, change is a kind of universal concept. It happens every day. So the more adept we can be at managing change and embracing change with a positive mindset, the better for us, because we're not going to, things aren't going to stop changing. That's just a fact of life. It may be difficult. It may mean, there's a lot more to consider. It may mean lots of uncertainty, but, it's not going to change. Change isn't going to change. The rate of change isn't going to change. No, we're always going to have to deal with this stuff. So to be successful, we need to be really good at dealing with it. This is a report from Accenture, where they look at the soft skills that businesses are looking for. And you see it's things like problem solving, leadership, creativity, innovation, and adaptability. So there's change in there. That, this is something that individuals, if they're good at it, can really stand out, can really be useful to organizations. If they're able to be adaptable, be flexible, be creative, be innovative, solve problems. These are the sort of the areas that people are really, really looking for skills in. So the more you can, be good at change and adaptability, the better it will be for you and your career. So let's look at some of the reasons that individuals and organizations find it difficult to manage and deal with change. So one of the main things is complacency. It sounds a bit sort of, maybe sounds a bit sort of mean to sort of say, oh, if you don't like change, you're just complacent. But really, that's a little bit of what it is. You're sort of happy with things as they are. You don't see a need to do things differently. I'm happy with the status quo. When people are comfortable with the way things are, they're often oblivious to some of the things that need changing, because you think everything's working. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'm happy with the status quo, and this is essentially a barrier to change. And to go into these in a bit more detail, lots of large organizations have these things sort of endemic within them. So there are lots and lots of patterns. We've always been doing things like this, so let's keep on doing it like this. Or that looks like that kind of problem, or we solved that in this way before, so let's try it again, to see if it works again. Or, the same mistakes keep happening. So there's lots of patterns. And change is a positive thing that can overcome some of these elements. There's a fear of risk and failure. People don't want to change, don't want to try new things because they fear failure. They're risk averse, and they stay in these comfort zones. Now, a comfort zone is kind of useful. If we were always out of our comfort zone, we'd be sort of shivering wrecks. So it's really good to have the concept of a comfort zone, but as long as we don't spend all our time in it, all our time shielding ourselves from some of these interesting and new things that we could experience, and reacting to some of the new ways of working or the new ways of living that are out there. So we've got to try and push ourselves sometimes, at least to the edge of our comfort zone, if not sometimes out of our comfort zone as well. And again, more barriers within big organizations, lots and lots of layers that can really inhibit change and stop change from happening. The more you have to get a decision through, or a new idea through these different layers, and at each layer there's somebody that can say no, and saying no is much easier than saying yes. Let's just forget about it, or do it later, or keep things as they are. So there's all these layers. There's lots and lots of rules and traditions as well. This is how we do things around here. We've been doing it this way for 100 years. There's lots of that, and people really use these rules and traditions as a crutch sometimes to save themselves, to keep themselves in that useful comfort zone. And then people have their own agendas, and again, this is kind of natural. We all want things that work for us. Sometimes we've built up a nice position and a nice, set of abilities and skills that suit us, and it's not in our interests to change. So we've got our own agenda, and you have a lot of this within lots of different divisions of organizations, and people have their own agenda. They want to keep things as they are. there's also this sort of feeling of loss when we're faced with change. We feel like we're going to lose our security, whether it's our job security or whether it's our level of security about our competence, for example. We might lose our social network. We might, if we have to move to a new department or get a new team or something like that, we might fear that we lose those networks, those links that we've built up with people. If we move to a new company, or if we get a new boss or something like that, we fear that we've sort of lost those useful links that we've built up. We fear the sort of loss of knowledge. We might have to learn new things to deal with the new situation, and that might mean that we're not as kind of knowledgeable as we used to be, or we think we were. We fear a loss of power. Maybe other people have come in and that sort of threatens us because we're not as powerful as we used to be. And we also fear a loss of freedom. We're being forced to adapt to this change. We're being forced to work in this new way. So we don't have this element of freedom anymore. So we can, it's clear that, it's really hard to deal with, and it's understandable when people find change difficult, and that they don't want to change, because it impacts us in so many ways. And it's, often very, very difficult to deal with, difficult to come to terms with. So I think the first thing that I would think of is we should feel compassionate to people who are put in change situations, because they are feeling loss in all of these areas. They're facing difficult scenarios. They've got lots of ambiguity and doubt about what might happen. So it's hard. So the first thing we should think about is, how can we be compassionate to people who are going through periods of change? But we must move forward. Another very old quote by Machiavelli: the reformer has enemies in all those who profit by the old order, and only lukewarm defenders in all those who would profit by the new order. So what that means is that people who want to enact change, who want to try and do things differently, all those people who would benefit from keeping things the same, who have their own agenda, who like the status quo, thanks, they hold change back. And even those people that might get a benefit from the new way of doing things, they're still only sometimes quite tentative or skeptical. They're not sort of wholehearted in the way that they sort of support it and get on board. So it's hard. You've probably heard lots of change movements have been unsuccessful, and it's very hard to enact change in large organizations, and it's difficult. So I'm keen to sort of pause there a little bit and just get some thoughts from some of you. What's your experience of change? What did you find easy? What did you find difficult? And what do you find helps in dealing with change? I'd like to ask 3 or 4 people to put their hand up and just share with us your experiences of change and some of your thoughts around the concept. Who's willing to give it a go and say a few words? Ian Shannon, thank you very much, Ian. You can start.
I think for me, it's I only build things up in my head, and it's a lot worse in my head than it actually is. It's the fear of the unknown, I suppose, isn't it? I think experience of change helps, definitely. I think anyone that's worked in the NHS for some time has probably gone through numerous restructures. When you think back to where you are, I think most people have probably profited in some way, whether it's a promotion for a role or just gaining different experience from working with different people. But despite all the experiences, it is always still a nerve-wracking time. But like for me, I'm trying to stay positive in the thought that all the changes that I've gone through so far in the past, nothing's been negative. It's all been positive. And hopefully, like I said in the past, I've built things up in my head and they've never turned out to be the way I've imagined. So it's that kind of reflection that I need to stay on going forward.
That's great. Thanks, Ian. Thanks very much. Heather Tiernan.
Yeah, hi everybody. I've been in the NHS for about 19 years, so I've come from PCTs into the CSU. So I've been through quite a few changes. I've had a few changes in the CSU myself as well. So yeah, I've been through quite a few. And I think a lot of it is about the scale of change. If it's a really big change that affects lots of organisations, that can be much more difficult to cope with. Because I remember when I first joined the CSU and I was looking after the Hereford, Shropshire and Telford CCGs, and I didn't even know who they were. I didn't have a name, and I didn't even have a telephone number. So I Googled Hereford CCG, phoned somebody up and introduced myself. And nobody knew how to use the system because the SBS ISFE system was all brand new to everybody. And it was just the sheer volume of the huge change of everything, of where I was based, who I was working for, the systems I'm using, and it was just the whole lot, you know. And for the first few weeks, it was scary, but it wasn't just scary for me, it was scary for everybody. And just making that first Googled phone call to somebody in Hereford, we became quite good friends actually, and they were really grateful for the call and they were feeling just as scared as me. And sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and just stick your toe in. Be one of the first if you need to. If you think, you know, you're going to be working with those people and you've never met them, I'm sure they'd be grateful for just a quick email or a quick phone call. And you might both be as nervous as each other, you know, and just reach out. That's what we need to do. Just help each other and reach out. And most of us will be feeling very similar.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Heather. Really great points. Andy.
Hi, everyone. I mean, I've been in the NHS now just over 30 years, so I've been through quite a few changes. And also during those 30 years, I've worked my way up the hierarchy. And I think it affects people lower down more than people at the top, or it seems to, because you're in a situation where you know there's going to be change. And if you're on a lower band, you're not part of driving the change, you're the passenger. And sometimes you feel you can't even sort of offer directions. And as you work up the banding, you probably have more of a say in how it works.
So it's that lack of freedom, isn't it? It's that loss of freedom element.
Yeah, and loss of empowerment, where you don't have a say and things are being done to you rather than having a say in it. And often, if you're on a lower band, you don't actually know the final destination. I mean, things have got better. When I'm saying that because Lynn's sitting there. She's laughing now. But yeah, no, it is difficult for people. Being in, you know, we have gone through an awful lot of change, and change is good, but when you're in the NHS, it's imposed on you. So, and you have to make it work the best you can in the best way you can.
Yeah, and you know, you probably find that that's the situation in many large organisations as well. It's often imposed on the vast majority of the populace. So yeah, it's about dealing with it and making the best of it. Even if you're not in a position where you can influence it, I guess. But yeah, thanks, Andy. And Kulsum.
Hi, James. What I wanted to say was that change, wherever it is, it's difficult. It's not easy for anybody. It's quite scary as well. But I think if you have the right level of support, your people are open and honest, I think that helps. It does ease the situation, regardless of where you are. So I think openness, honesty, and the right level of support, I think does help. It does ease the situation a little bit, and it just people, you know, it is scary, but it will put people's mind at rest.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you to those four of you. Let me go a bit further. So, types of change. I thought it'd be useful if we just briefly talked through, you know, like the structure of change and some different types of change. So you've obviously got structural change, which is maybe how an organisation or a department organises itself. So you might, find yourself reporting into different teams or different people, or you might be in, a different, function, for example. There's process change. So this is the way we're going to do things from now on, and it's a little bit different. Or, these are the processes we're going through, and this is why. Cultural change. So maybe, we want to change the way we behave or react to things. Maybe an organisation wants to sort of, have a more positive approach to things, or maybe wants to instill a certain set of values or something like that. And then these two last ones, the theory E is the sort of the economic model of change, where you might have, organisations, will try and make savings, often by, cutting employees or cutting costs. And obviously there's a great big impact to that kind of change. And then theory O, which is organisational change. And theory E is meant to sort of be a lot faster moving, where you can go in and make these changes very, very quickly. The theory O is something that might last over a period of years as you try and change the structure or the culture or things like that. So there's different types of change. This is within organisations. Obviously, you have change that might be in society, might be political change. There might be, obviously changes that are brought on by outside events like the pandemic, for example, which, make lots of other changes necessary, like working virtually a lot of the time. So there's all sorts of types of and reasons for change. And if we look at sort of how we might react to some of these changes, so this is the process of transition, Fisher's transition curve, and you'll see that there's lots to look at on this slide, but at the bottom here you've got the curve itself. So you've got anxiety. Some people like the idea of change, so they might feel like, at last something's going to change, but then they have the fear, the threat, the guilt, or maybe they overreacted, or maybe they didn't cover themselves in glory in terms of how they reacted to the change. There's even this line here, denial, where people, they stick their head in the sand and they don't see the reason for change, or they don't believe that it's even happened. Then there's this sort of, depression or disillusionment. Who am I in relation to these changes? Or, I'm not taking part in this change, for example. But then often, there's even this, the hostility bit, I'll make this work if it kills me, that's how I'll deal with the change. Or there's a positive approach to dealing with the change. I can see myself in the future, this can work and be good. But there you see there's the sort of the underlying possibility at the start and the end of this complacency that we talked about. So you can see here, some sort of, reactions and different stages to change and how we see it. There's also this concept of looking at this is often used with new technical developments, the adoption curve. So, if you think about how you adapted to using mobile phones, for example, you have the innovators or tech enthusiasts who are the first people that buy it. They maybe are the beta testers or the people that are most enthusiastic about these new technologies. Then there are the early adopters, so everybody else that sort of comes on, and as it becomes more popular, they say, well, this is the new thing to do, and I'm going to get on board with that. I think it's really exciting. Then you've got the pragmatists. Well, everybody's using it, lots of people are using it, so that I should do it as well. It's in my best interests to get on board with this. And then you've got the late majority, people that are a bit more conservative, and then the laggards, the skeptics, who sort of say, well, don't like all this newfangled stuff. I'm not going to do it unless I really have to. So that's quite interesting to look at it in that sort of way, how you change and adapt to new technologies or new trends or new developments in things. And you can see this in lots of areas. And a good example here is in our attitudes towards food. So, for example, there's lots of evidence out there that it's better for the planet and arguably better for our health as well if we eat less meat and eat more a vegetarian diet. So there might be the innovators who sort of really get on board, the vegans, or the people that have been vegetarian for a long time. You've got flexitarians, so that people that vegetarian for most of the time, people that are open to it, people who have the, I guess, fish pescatarians, and then other sort of attitudes towards it. People who have processed foods, omnivores, conservatives, carnivores, who sort of say, I'm just going to eat nothing but meat and I ignore everything at this sort of end of the scale. So that's just an interesting way to look at it. And you could look at other things like climate change. There's seemingly incontrovertible science that would suggest that climate change is a thing and it is scientific fact, and I certainly believe that. However, changing is taking a long time. So we've got changes in attitudes, we've got structural changes that need to be made, to sort of look at better ways of looking after the planet. So you can see, and also there's this sort of lack of urgency as well. Whereas, we can see that if things carry on as they are now, then 100 years in the future, things would be vastly different. Lots of wildfires, lots of temperature changes, lots more flooding, lots more volatile weather. Whereas at the moment we can see it, but we're not sure if it's really caused by that or not, or so there's no sort of urgency to change. And I think that's again something that is interesting to consider in terms of how can we convince people to see positively the changes that need to be made, and to sometimes make the sacrifices that come involved with change. This is an interesting concept in terms of understanding how people react to different situations. So this is from a book called Mindset by Carol Dweck, and her concept is the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. So for people that have a fixed mindset, they see essentially that they are as they will always be. They can't, if they're not good at something now, they can't be better at it, or they can't, if they're not good at public speaking now, they will never be good at public speaking, for example. So they see this intelligence, this ability as static. They tend to avoid challenges. They give up easily in the face of adversity if something doesn't go right the first time. They see effort as fruitless because they're never going to be able to do anything differently. They're never going to be able to change. If they get negative feedback, rather than take it on board and learn from it, they see it as negative, as criticism. And if other people are successful, they see them as threatening. And the growth mindset aspect, people with a growth mindset believe that they can develop themselves, they can be developed, they can change, they can do things differently. They embrace challenges as something that is exciting, something that is makes them learn new things, makes them step up their game, makes them improve. If things don't go right the first time, they persist. They see effort as a necessary path to mastery. So, you've got to practice, you've got to learn, you've got to try and improve. And the more you do it, the more you fail and learn from those failures, the better you'll get. The more criticism and feedback you take on, the more you can learn from it. And if other people do something well, rather than feel threatened by it, they take lessons and inspiration from it. So, I guess this is something that you could think of in yourself, but also in others that you deal with, and that your colleagues, for example, how you can help them take a growth mindset approach to change. Any thoughts on that before I move to the next section? Are you familiar with growth mindset? Are you, can you see yourself on the technology adoption curve? Can we have a couple of people? Any comments? Happy listening? Okay, I'll carry on. I'm going to show a video. Hands up if you've read the book Option B by Sheryl Sandberg. Okay, I'll put it up. So this is a video which is an introduction to it. And I think it's what's interesting about this is looking at the concept of sudden change versus incremental change. Let me just make sure I'm sharing my sound. Hold on. Share sound. There we go.
2 years ago, I lost my husband, Dave, unexpectedly, which is an unimaginable thing to live through. It felt like I was sucked into a void, like I couldn't quite breathe or think. I didn't think I was going to get through it. And I was even more worried about getting my children through it. I could barely get through it myself, let alone get my 2 children through this.
We can't control what happens to us, but we do have some influence over how we respond to the events and hardships in our lives.
What Adam gave me were specific things I could do.
We wanted to write a book that would combine her insights with the best evidence, but also with other people's stories.
Becoming paralyzed was not something, it was written on my week at a glance, you know.
On my 18th birthday, I was sent to prison.
Sexual abuse led to wanting to end my life.
When my mom was waked out on drugs, you know, I was pretty much raising my brothers and sisters.
We all face challenges, and some of them are big and huge and traumatic, and some of them are the daily challenges, but we need resilience for all of it.
Resilience is not a fixed personality trait. It's a lifelong project.
A few weeks after Dave died, there was a father-son activity. Our friend Phil and I were talking about who should do it. I said, okay, well, that's good, but like, I want Dave to go with our son. And he said, option A is not available, so let's just kick the shit out of option B.
When you don't have an option, when it's totally taken away from you forever, you go to option B.
I discovered what many, many people discovered. You have a lot more grit than you think you do.
I've got nothing to lose in trying to live the biggest life I can.
Asking for help is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of strength to understand when you need help.
In some way, we're all living option B. And the idea is, how do we make the very most of it?
So yeah, really good book, Option B. And I drawn out some lessons from the book. One of the quotes from the book is that the psychologist Martin Seligman found that 3 Ps can stunt recovery and sort of reaction to some of these changes. So personalization, the belief that we are at fault; pervasiveness, the belief that an event will affect all areas of our life; and permanence, the belief that the aftershocks of the event will last forever. So, you know, maybe we're not talking about these kind of changes in our, you know, situation today, you know, in the context of your work, you know, this sort of seriousness of change. But I think all of it applies a little bit. The pervasiveness, certainly, that the change will affect all areas of our life. We might overblow it, and we might sort of think that it will affect everything. And also this permanence as well, the belief that the aftershocks of the event will last forever. And so some positive recommendations are to kick the elephant out of the room, in effect, talk about it. So Sheryl Sandberg, you know, after a period of you know, sort of noticing that people were feeling very awkward in her presence, you know, after the death of her husband, she proactively went and talked to them about it. She said, let's talk about what's happened. So she led that conversation. So she just wanted to get the elephant out of the room so that they could, you know, move on from it almost, or, you know, talk about it, absolutely, but not feel like it's something that's hanging over them, this sort of undiscussed, unsaid thing. building people's self-confidence and helping people to show themselves self-compassion, you know, and doing this for yourself as well, being kind to yourself, you know, giving yourself the, you know, I spoke about this right at the start, that, you know, change is hard, so it's okay to feel that it's hard. So feeling that, you know, you're going to give yourself time, you're going to give yourself, you know, a bit of compassion to deal with it and get over it and give that to others. Celebrate what you do well. So, you know, think about, you know, within these changes that you're faced with, what are you still able to bring that's a strength of yours? How can you thrive in this new environment because of your strengths and your abilities? And find the small things that make you happy. So, you know, if, you know, whatever's happened, whatever's changed, think about what's still good, what you still enjoy, which relationships you still get something from, which experiences and things you take satisfaction from. Don't over focus on the negatives. Make sure that you're looking at the positives as well. So again, looking at the difference between sudden and incremental change. Sudden change feels shocking. You know, we feel unprepared and at risk. You know, so maybe if there's been this big announcement about something and we haven't been prepared for it, and that's when we might sort of react badly because you know it's all a big unknown, and you know there's few answers available because we don't know them yet. We haven't been told them or we haven't found them out. Whereas incremental change, and obviously, you know, if you have agency or authority to, you know, influence change, you know, incremental change allows people to adapt, allows people to sort of learn and experiment and make those changes. You know, I think this last point about incremental change also shows us that, you know, we should have a kind of daily change mindset, that, you know, change is something that happens to us all the time. And so seeing it as an incremental process, there will be big changes sometimes, but I think a lot of the time we can build up the sort of the muscle to deal with change if we're ready to do it on a daily basis, if we're ready to take learnings and have a positive attitude to change whenever we can. It will make those bigger changes easier to deal with and easier to make sense of and easier to respond to. So thinking about, you know, helping you to understand the case for change and helping others to understand the case for change, you know, this is how you can help others as well. It's to acknowledge and recognise the sort of the unsustainable or unavoidable present. You know, we can't keep doing things this way because, you know, this would be the opportunity cost, or this would be the cause, or this would be the result, or, you know, there's no use fighting against this because it's happened, or it's going to happen, so it's unavoidable. So it's helping people realise that there's kind of, it's fruitless to go against it. Showing and talking about the desired future. So, you know, here's some change that's happening. This is why. You know, this is the desired future that we're looking for. This is what will make it all worthwhile. This desired future will be better than the present. Will give us more advantages and more opportunities than the present. So it's something to be desired. Acknowledge that it won't be easy. You know, there will be things that you'll have to learn. There will be times when you feel unsettled. There will be times when it, you know, might feel emotional. There'll be times when you have to help others. So, you know, it won't be easy. So I think it's really important not to gloss over it and not to say, just get on with it, you know, just change already. You know, there's lots of compassion you can show people and lots of understanding you can show if they find it difficult, or, you know, acknowledge that you're going to find it difficult too, for example. Help them understand why you can do it, why they can do it. You've got the abilities, you've got the strengths, you've got the capability. You know, I think somebody at the start said, you know, they've seen lots of change, so you've managed it before, you can do it again. You've built up that kind of muscle, that resilience, so it's something that you can handle. And help people. So this goes back to the point about agendas. from before, help people see what's in it for them. If they can see that, you know, the change will benefit them, that will make their life better, or will make their career better, or their, you know, their ways of doing things easier, or it'll make things better for the customer or the patient or whoever, you know, that's something that's really important too. So that you're helping people understand what's in it for them if they make these sacrifices, if they commit to getting on board, learning new things, for example. I also find it's really useful to think about making a plan for how you'll deal and adapt to change. Really sort of breaking it down like you would a big goal. So if you think, you know, in terms of, you know, if you wanted to climb a mountain, you would, you know, the change that's necessary to get fit to, you know, climb Everest, for example, is massive. You know, you'd have to get fit, you'd have to get acclimatized, you'd have to train, you'd have to get materials and resources and things like that. So, you know, it seems like this massive change that is insurmountable. Literally, it's a mountain. But, you know, maybe by breaking it down, you might be able to see what would it take to get to each of those steps. You know, there's a reason that, you know, Everest has base camps, for example. So what are those steps, and how can you get to each of those different steps along that change journey? What resources will help you? So are there resources that will help you learn? Are there resources in terms of people, their peers, or sounding boards, or people that can help them, you know, deal with the emotional, you know, reaction or stress of change, for example? Any kind of resources, really. You know, maybe it's, you know, some downtime, maybe it's some team building or things like that, you know, those kind of resources. And think about how you will help. So, you know, we might think about how are we going to adapt to change? You know, how am I going to do it individually? How am I going to deal with this change? But what often helps is how you feel, how you sort of make a plan for supporting others, how you can look at it from that point of view, maybe externalize some of it rather than looking at it all internally for yourself. How can you help others deal with it as well? That might help you cope personally too. And then as you progress, you know, celebrate, you know, each stage that you reach, each sort of small incremental change that you make, celebrate it, mark it, you know, some way sort of record it, for example, and compare that with where you've come from, so that you can see the journey that you've taken and the progress that's been made. You know, review it to see what you can learn from how things went and how you can take that forward into the next stage. And what can you change in terms of your approach, if anything, you know, based on what you've learned, what you've reviewed. I'm going to show another video which is really useful to think about how sort of change happens and how you can get involved in that. You may have seen it. It's quite a famous TED talk called How to Start a Movement by Derek Sivers. So I'll show that now.
So ladies and gentlemen, at TED we talk a lot about leadership and how to make a movement. So let's watch a movement happen start to finish in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons from it. First, of course, you know, a leader needs the guts to stand out and be ridiculed. But what he's doing is so easy to follow. So here's his first follower with a crucial role. He's going to show everyone else how to follow. Now notice that the leader embraces him as an equal. So now it's not about the leader anymore, it's about them, plural. Now there he is calling to his friends. Now if you notice that the first follower is actually an underestimated form of leadership in itself. It takes guts to stand out like that. The first follower is what transforms a lone nut into a leader. And here comes a second follower. Now it's not a lone nut, it's not two nuts, 3 is a crowd, and a crowd is news. So a movement must be public. It's important to show not just the leader, but the followers, because you find that new followers emulate the followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, and immediately after, 3 more people. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point. Now we've got a movement. So notice that as more people join in, it's less risky. So those that were sitting on the fence before now have no reason not to. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, but they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. So over the next minute, you'll see all of the those that prefer to stick with the crowd, because eventually they would be ridiculed for not joining in. And that's how you make a movement. But let's recap some lessons from this. So first, if you are the type, like the shirtless dancing guy, that is standing alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals. So it's clearly about the movement, not you. Okay, but we might have missed the real lesson here. The biggest lesson, if you noticed, did you catch it? Is that leadership is over-glorified. That yes, it was the shirtless guy was first, and he'll get all the credit, but it was really the first follower that transformed the lone nut into a leader. So as we're told that we should all be leaders, that would be really ineffective. If you really care about starting a movement, have the courage to follow and show others how to follow. And when you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first one to stand up and join in. And what a perfect place to do that, Ted. Thanks.
Okay, so I thought that was really good. So, you know, the challenge for you is to think about, you know, whatever changes you're facing or might be facing in the future, think about what your action plan might be. How will you personally adapt to change? How will you build your resilience? And crucially, how will you help and support others as well? So that's all of my content for you. I'm very happy to answer some questions or chat to you about change for the time we've got left. So pop your hand up if you've got a question or a comment. Maybe you could start off, Lynn. What question have you got?
Thanks, James. Really interesting. I loved the last slide, the last little video. Something probably I appreciated, that maybe being that first follower is a more difficult role than being the leader, and the importance of those people. So definitely something I will be taking away from there. I guess one question for me is, currently the changes that are happening are unavoidable because they are being mandated, and therefore what tips could you give people to maybe, if they recognize they're in some of that negative headspace, what can they do to try and move themselves into that more positive headspace?
Well, I think first of all, I would try and find the positives. So that's the sort of the simplest place to start. Think about, you know, it's very easy to think about how this negatively impacts us. What might come out of it that's positive? I would try and also put yourself in the shoes of the people that have decided on the change and have you know, instigated it, and look at it from their perspective, so that you can try and understand, you know, the reason why, and the thought process and the rationale, and maybe that end result, that desired end result for it. I think the more you can kind of rationalize it and see it as, yes, you know, although it might be uncomfortable and difficult, I can see why it's happening, therefore I'm gonna, you know, play my part and do my best to be a positive part of it, because otherwise, you know, you're kind of getting in the way or you're slowing it down. If you can't really truly see why by trying to put yourself in their shoes, I would ask, you know, I would sort of say, can we get a bit more context on this? It would really help to get, you know, to feel on board with this and get my team and my colleagues on board, if we could just sort of tell them the story of this and understand the context and the decision-making process. You know, and again, that's, you know, that's not something that they should see as a threat. You know, we're not sort of questioning your decision-making process. All we're trying to do is to try and make a bit of sense of it so that we can process it and therefore get on board. I think sometimes you need that full story. You also need the confidence that the change is something that is going to be worth your effort, I think. So it's not going to be one change this week, another change next week, because that's what stops people sometimes from getting on board, because they think, well, if I just put my head in the sand and wait for all this to blow over. So I think it's getting that confidence that this is actually something that's going to be seen through, that has been, you know, just for yourself, I guess. The more you feel, you know, like it's something that isn't going to flip flop, that is going to carry on, then you can think, right, well, it is worth my time and effort getting behind this, because it's for the long term.
That's really helpful. And I think picking up on one of the points you mentioned earlier was about responding to a situation rather than necessarily reacting.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've had to learn, a skill I've had to learn, because and one thing I use is that on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is sheer and certain death, how important will this be in 12 months' time? And quite often, it's probably a 3 at best.
Yeah.
Out of 10, and just taking that moment to stop and breathe rather than or become, you know, getting yourself into a negative space about it's really important. I'll open the floor up. Any questions? Pop your hand up, pop a question into chat.
Yeah, let's see if we can have 3 or 4 people put your hand up and make a comment or ask a question. Tell us about, you know, something that you either took from this as a key insight, or some piece of advice that you have for others dealing with change. Let's do a bit of peer learning, a bit of peer support, peer reflection.
I think for me would be, you know, we're all in the same boat. You're not the only one. So if there is change, it's not just tailored for you, it's for everybody. So we can all work through it together. You know, let's bounce off each other, let's speak to each other, let's talk to each other, see how we're feeling, and see if we can learn from the others as well. You know, if one person's feeling insecure, you know, if we need some more clarity, you know, I think it just helps carry on talking to people. It always helps, rather than, you know, you feeling isolated. And, you know, what's more worse, being at home, working from home, and you don't have colleagues sat next to you, you know, while you're going through this change. So therefore utilize the, you know, Teams channels that we've got, pick the phone up and, you know, speak to people with more clarity.
Great, thank you. Got a comment on chat from Tracy. Change is inevitable. Go with the flow. Deep breath and plunge. That's good. Bit of gusto there. A couple more.
My feeling is it is what it is, and you have to go with it, you know, with open arms. Yeah.
What how do people sort of respond to that? Do they you know, get on board with your sort of gusto? Do you have to give them a bit of convincing?
Everyone's different.
Great. Yeah.
Every character's different, aren't they? So yeah, you some people are more for it. Some people take a little bit of, you know, pushing along or whatever. But basically, you're all there. We're all working for the NHS and just all happy each other, I think.
Yeah, oh, I love that. That's a really simple piece of insight. Everybody's different. You know, we'll all have our own, like, nuanced way of reacting, and our nuanced way of dealing with change. So yeah, that's a really, really great point. Andy.
Andy, you're on mute still, just so you know.
Yeah, on the slide with the integrated and sudden change, I think what I learned, especially over the last couple of years, is sudden change is far easier because it's suddenly there and you adapt to it. Whereas with integrated, you have months of meetings and waffle, and that allows fear to grow. I mean, the obvious one is moving to working from home when the pandemic struck. You know, if you had planned that, it wouldn't have worked as well as it did.
Well, I think that's a great point. If you'd planned it, you would have planned it over 5 years. The rate of change. Yeah, and look at what everybody achieved in a couple of months. So I guess sometimes it's yeah, we don't realise what we're capable of. And the temptation is to sort of say, well, you know, we've done that rapid change. Let's never do that again, because it, you know, it was really difficult to deal with. But what was the payoff from that? It enabled so much. There was so much innovation, so much adaptation. So I guess it's kind of, you know, being on that sort of that footing, that responsiveness and pace of change, without necessarily having to have a crisis to sort of launch you into action.
I think
you could
one
have that
big
pace
plus
of change
from it,
without a crisis.
one big plus from it was because it happened to everyone from CEO down to the lowest banding. You know, it affected everyone, and everyone could input to it, and we were all learning the same thing at the same time, and ideas were coming forward. It didn't matter where they came from the top to the bottom. If it worked, and it benefited everyone. So again, it shows that, you know, everyone can contribute, and I think with the integrated, that isn't always the case. Yeah, it is. Everyone has an opinion, but it's not always immediate.
Yeah,
and it
incremental.
can always sort of filter
you
its
mean.
way up to the people that can actually drive this.
Yeah. Thanks, Andy. And one last one from Heather.
Yeah, it's me again. I think what I'm going to take from this is, because I've got a team of 10 that I manage, and I've in my head, I've already made assumptions about how some of them are going to react to this change. And I think I need to stop doing that and just talk to them and see how they're feeling, because I've kind of felt that, because we've been through changes before, I've kind of felt that there's a couple of people that are going to struggle with it more than others. And I think I should stop assuming that and just talk to them. I think we go down the track sometimes of making assumptions based on what we know of people, and it's not always correct, is it? So yeah, that's definitely what I'm going to take from it. Yeah.
Love that. Thank you, Heather. Thank you. Okay, back to you, Lynn.
Could I ask everybody just to show their appreciation to James? It was excellent. Thank you very much. I know colleagues will have really enjoyed it. I've personally got a lot from it as well. As you saw me taking a photo, because I loved those quotes. I will be using them in the future. My team will be sick of me, but thank you for your time, James, and input. Really appreciate it. Also, thank you to colleagues, to all of you guys, really, for taking the time out of your day to come and do this. It's really easy sometimes just to go, oh, I'm so busy doing the doing. I'm hoping you will all have taken something away from this as well that will help you moving forward. And just one final thank you to colleagues Megan and to Becky, who won NHS Finance, for organising this, putting this together for us and coordinating it and dealing with some of the technical challenges we've had in the background. So thank you, guys.
Thanks, Lynn. And thank you to you for chairing the session. It's been really great. And you dealt with the technical issues very well. So thanks, yeah. And thanks, James.
So thank you all. Go take a break away from your desk. You've been at your screen for quite a while now. So and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks all.
Bye bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.